The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Sun Tzu. He was also quoted as saying, strategy without tactics is the slowest road to victory. However, tactics without strategy, well, that's just the noise before defeat. Say what you want about the Chinese. They are masters of strategy. While for decades and decades, the U.S. has been primarily focused on tactics, they have been winning the world strategy game. And if we don't recognize this and fix it soon, it will be our end. In today's video, I'm going to outline the details of this in two parts. Part 1 is going to be here on YouTube. Part 2 is so controversial and so sensitive that I had to go and put it over at Patreon. But it's information everyone needs to hear. The Chinese are winning the world strategy game. They're playing the long game. There's not going to be any Red Dawn invasions of North America. They're going to win without having fired a shot. In fact, it's very likely, if things don't change, North Americans are going to invite the Chinese here. But if you want the details of that, Patreon. It's the best I can do. I have to keep my word to this platform. Everybody who ever signed up as a partner with YouTube had to put their name on a piece of paper. And that piece of paper said, if you're going to talk about things that are sensitive, you have to do it elsewhere. Asymmetric warfare. What is it? David and Goliath warfare. History is littered with stories of this. Poor countries against rich countries, internal versus external threats. But right down at the very bottom of this, they mention something. Miscellaneous unconventional means, i.e. poisoning water, food supplies, exploitation of media by staging scenes to sway public opinion. Nobody's asking this question about Cuba right now. How all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, everything else is off the front pages. But that first thing about water and food supplies, it's an ancient tactic. Large militaries like the Romans were constantly being harassed by small bands and tribes that just didn't appreciate them occupying their lands. Now, the Romans were the best financed, best trained, best equipped military of their day. No one stood nose to nose with the Roman Empire. But there were those that learned, necessity being the mother of invention. The Visigoths, the Huns, they had a very unique tactic, and I'd like to outline it because it is relevant to something that was said recently by President Biden. One of the tactics that was used was food. Occasionally, one of these bands might be pursued to the point where they realize they've got to do something to fight back. They can't just keep running. So what they would do is they would set up camp, and they would start cooking up some pots of stew. They would put large slabs of meat over the fire and get it cooking, smelling really good. And usually, eventually, someone from the pursuing army would get wind of this, and they would begin the pursuit again. Now, instead of packing everything up, the Huns or the Visigoths or whoever would leave everything in place. The tents, they'd leave a few weapons behind. They'd leave the food cooking on the fires. Because they knew that the Romans, when they arrived, would take the spoils of war, and they would eat. Many Roman soldiers believed themselves to be underpaid and underappreciated. So any chance they had to do something like this, well, why would you not? It's free stuff. They'd even leave behind casks of wine. So these soldiers that were chasing these little ragtag bands that were underappreciated and underpaid, it was payday. What a fantastic coup. You get all this yummy stew all pre-cooked for you and all this food, these great, wonderful slabs of meat and wine. But little did they know that before they left, the Huns or the Visigoths poisoned all of it. And so for the cost of a few tents and some food, they were able to decimate large armies without firing a shot. They'd wait until the next morning or later that night when the Roman soldiers were puking their guts up, and they'd hit. And they'd hit quickly, and they'd do immense amounts of damage. Because the Romans, and this is the most important part, the Romans were arrogant. The Romans couldn't conceive of such a strategy. Who would do such a thing? Somebody who had no other choice, that's who. Somebody who had to learn and adapt. You see, this is where sometimes being the biggest, strongest, most powerful military in the world, hint, hint, has its disadvantages. And what do we know about the history of Rome? The Visigoths sacked it. Rome fell. Many, not too many years before this, couldn't have even imagined such a thing. Asymmetric warfare made it happen. Tactics that were beyond their ability to understand. Now, does this comment make sense? You need F-15s and nukes. See, this is the final stage right here when we have leaders that think this way. They aren't students of history. And lest anyone think voting in democracy is the end-all be-all of freedom, Caesar's arrogance. The common people loved him. The month of Quintilis was renamed July in his honor. Later, he was declared dictator for life. Offered the crown of a king 3 times, but refused. Why? He looked down on being a king because it wasn't democratic. The Romans had killed their previous king for being a tyrant. Caesar was the first to print his own image on a Roman minted coin. Some of you, the denarius, some of you might remember the Bible scripture where Jesus references this. Arrogance. Arrogance is a weakness in the armor of any state, any military. And those who know how to find that spot, that unguarded area, they will exploit it. This was the downfall of King George. That ragtag band of rebels over in the colonies, who do they think they are? They can't overthrow the crown of England with mere muskets. Asymmetric warfare. The Boston Tea Party, the Concord Minutemen, was something that this king had never experienced and couldn't understand. That, combined with many other things, the involvement of the French, the Native Americans, the distance, everything combined to bring us to where we are now. Arrogance. China knows it is our downfall. China knows that if they continue to exploit it, our desire for distractions and bread and circuses, they will eventually win. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But in part 2, another form of arrogance is also being used to exploit weakness. But of course, it's a bit controversial, and I can't talk about it here. But trust me, this was a plan. The 2020 sniffles was a plan that the groundwork for it was laid far in advance. And I have proof for this. But of course, once again, I have to keep my word. I can tell the truth, I can hint at the truth, but I can't come right out and say it here on this platform. It's just part of the deal I made. So if you would like to continue this video with me over at Patreon, the link, of course, will be down in the description box. Like I said, it is $1 US, not per video, not per week, per month. And if you sign up for a year, it's even less than that. And you can get read in on human intelligence, on asymmetric warfare, on what's really going on behind the scenes, and also why you need to know this. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without having to fire a single shot. And the Chinese are masters of it. I'll leave it there. God bless, like, share, subscribe, and we will see you tonight on Twitch.